So we'll be starting here in just another minute or 2 minutes. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Debbie Gibson with State Board of Accounts State Advisory Services. Thank you for attending our session on fraud. I have some housekeeping first for those of you that are joining in person and are wanting CPE for today's session. Make sure that you have signed in, and a CPE certificate will be emailed out to you later this week or next week. Okay. This session is being recorded and will be available on our website at sboa/gov. And if you have trouble locating it, please contact us. Chase's last slide will have contact information, but you can contact me at any time at dgibson, Gibson, at sboa.in.gov. For those of you who are joining us virtually today, if you have any questions, please put them in your chat feature. We will get to what we can at the end of the session. And if we don't get to your particular question, we will email it back to you. Again, our session today is on fraud, and this is actually International Fraud Awareness Week. How many of you were aware of that? Oh, okay, I've got one. Okay. Anyway, that just goes to show, sadly, that when it comes to fraud, it's not just homegrown. It's not just a state problem. It's not even a national problem. It's a worldwide problem. And it does take a lot of resources to combat. And we are here today so that we can enrich ourselves to be aware of what it is that are the conditions and circumstances that fraud does take place. It isn't new. Behind me is a picture of a pyramid. Back in the days, the pharaohs, of course, were very interested in protecting their stuff. And they assigned people to keep their stuff from getting stolen. The big difference between them and for those of us here today is that they were protecting stuff for one man. We today are protecting that resources that belong to our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors, people who have worked hard and have put their trust in us as public servants to ensure that these resources are put to good use. I've always considered that as an honor, as I know that all of you do too. Otherwise, we wouldn't be public servants. So thank you. We are aware that not all people can be trusted. So we need to not just be fraud aware, but fraud preventers. Today, we have two gentlemen here with us who have many dedicated years of public service that zeroed in on those who wanted to take advantage of the rest of us. With us today is State Board of Accounts Director of Special Investigations, Ed Wheel, who has been with SBOA for 3 years. He was a former special agent with the FBI for 24 years, and prior to that, a former Porter County police officer. Also with us is Scotty Stockton, our Director of Fraud Examination. Prior to coming on with us, he was the elected Putnam County Sheriff for 8 years, and also a former First Sergeant of the Indiana State Police. And he served on 3 federal task forces with the DEA, ATF, and FBI. They're going to be providing some case studies for us. And I always think case studies are really interesting because that gives you some ideas of maybe what you should be looking at in your own house, what you get, the gaps that allow these things to happen, and even kind of the personalities of people that committed these frauds. So I think that's always really, really a good thing, is to see these case studies. And that always leads me to, what can I do? What are the tools that are available to help prevent these things? Most of you know Chase Lennon. He's the director with State Advisory Services, and he's not only a CPA and certified internal auditor, but also a certified fraud examiner and certified government financial manager. He looks not just at processes from the outside in, he's also looking at things from a manager's perspective. He has been providing in our bulletins a roadmap of anti-fraud, and which he'll be discussing with you today. And he's also going to be providing some useful tools. Yes, he's nodding his head, yes. Finally, Adam Kowalski, who is a very knowledgeable manager working in our advisory group, will be going over briefly what State Advisory Services has been and will be doing in the short term. And I just want to point out that the reviews and the testing our group performs is beneficial, not just from an audit perspective, but also for you to be able to utilize in any of your anti-fraud that you're trying to implement. So without further ado, would Scotty and Ed please step up and start us off?
Afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
I'm going to talk kind of about special investigations, a little bit how we fit into State Board of Accounts. Then I've got about 4 investigations we've done that have been adjudicated both civilly and criminally at this point. And then I think Scotty's got a couple jokes to tell you.
I'm a juggle too.
State Board of Accounts. I want to rely on the right arrow. It's going to be an issue. Right arrow. You know what? Can I just do it on this? Yeah, there we go. That's easier. Okay. This is Mr. Paul Joyce. He is the state examiner currently, and he oversees the examinations and post audits of. We've got well over 4,000 units that we audit within the state of Indiana. I'm going to use that term a lot. Unit is any government entity that we audit. Town, city, county, sometimes not-for-profits, depending. But depending on what kind of unit it is, we've got about 270 odd employees. Of that number, about 230 are auditors, and they're part of 9 audit teams that are out conducting audits. And I don't know if you guys know this, sorry, but at any given time. So just real quick, because I know you're probably familiar with this, misfeasance, nonfeasance, and malfeasance, that's what we deal with. Misfeasance is doing something that is completely appropriate and an acceptable way of spending money, but just not doing it the right way. If a clerk treasurer buys office supplies, that's fine. It's a completely allowable expense, but if they don't keep the receipt, they've done something okay the wrong way. We almost never charge for that kind of stuff. Nonfeasance, basically not doing your job. And we do get a lot of this. when an elected official or a public official doesn't do their job and it ends up costing the town money or the unit money. We typically like to give a warning before we charge someone for that. But it does, and oftentimes they don't heed the warning. We had a case last year where a clerk treasurer she was withholding taxes but not paying the taxes to the government. So it resulted in fines and penalties. We came in, did an audit, told her, hey, you can't do this, you got to pay it. Come back 2 years later, she hadn't done it again. So we said, hey, we really mean it this time, you have to do it. Came in 2 years later, she hadn't done it again. So we ended up charging her, and it was around $160,000. So she had to pay. So SI will do non-feasance charge reports sometimes, but it's always going to be after. But what we mostly do is malfeasance, just flat out fraud. If a township trustee takes the credit card and takes his family on 59 personal vacations around the world, recently did happen, that's malfeasance. And that report, I'm not going to talk about that one today because it hasn't been criminally adjudicated yet, but if you want a good read, it is available on our website. It's the Columbus Township Trustee. It was right around $1.3 million, 59 personal vacations in 5 years.
Might have been a misunderstanding. No,
Sure. He accidentally took his kids to Disney every year.
it happens.
Okay. Now, special investigations. Like I said, we are separate from the audit teams. There are 12 of us throughout the state, northern team and a southern team. Currently, we have 2 supervisors one over each team. And we coordinate our investigations with local, state, and federal agencies. I would say between probably 80 to 90% of our investigations are worked jointly with the Indiana State Police. The second agency we deal with the most is probably the FBI. And then a lot of times we have local departments will pick up a case if it's reported to them. Sometimes we have one right now with the city of Portage. We have one with Kokomo PD right now. Just a couple that are involve criminal prosecution as well as our civil charges. We produce a charge report, and it is enforced by the Attorney General's office. We don't enforce it ourselves. We just issue the report. And then we, of course, assist in the criminal prosecutions. Almost every member of the team, I think everybody has, either testified at a trial or a sentencing hearing or something like that for criminal prosecutions. The vast majority of the people we charge do go to jail as well. About the only time we get one where they don't go to jail is the example I gave of the clerk that wasn't paying the taxes. It's not against the law. It's not fraud to be bad at your job. It's just so, but almost every other case we have, someone goes to jail. Okay, we get our complaints in a variety of ways. They all come to me. I get probably between 10 and 20 a week. But government referral is, the units are actually required. If there is a loss to that unit, they have to notify us by law. And this tends to be very accurate reporting because oftentimes they're having to report on a colleague, someone they like, and it's hard for them to do, but they know they have to do it. So the reporting tends to be very accurate when it comes from within the unit. Very rarely do you have something coming from the unit that's not accurate. Citizens' complaints. This is the most common kind of complaint I receive. It's also the least accurate. I bet it's 1 in 20 is legit. And I've learned this being here the last 3 years. I never really paid much attention to local politics, but local politics is nasty. these people absolutely hate each other in some of these counties. I was at an exit a couple months ago, and there was a feud between the commissioners and the council, and I was waiting for them to draw guns. That's how nasty it was in there. So we chase a lot of bad information with the citizen complaints, but Columbus Township, the $1.3 million, that was an anonymous tip that came in from a citizen. So sometimes they pay off. Sometimes law enforcement refers them to us if they've been notified and are involved already. They'll reach out to us. State police are very good about it. A lot of times they'll get information and they'll say, hey, we think this is going on. Can you guys go take a look at this? And they may not even do anything yet. We'll kind of go and get the preliminaries. And then, of course, our audit teams. This is very accurate too, because our audit teams obviously know what is malfeasance and not malfeasance. So. Okay. So why do we investigate allegations of malfeasance? It's because it's the law. And, it's the law for a reason. Who feels good about paying taxes? Who enjoys it? Yeah, me neither. But when I see in the news a public official is stealing, it makes me even madder. So there's a reason it's the law. Now, we have some internal steps. Whenever I get an allegation and we're going to look at it, I always open an assessment first. The reason being, we do not charge for the assessments. The only time that I will open an investigation immediately is if the police are involved and they've already arrested somebody for it. So maybe this theft was ongoing or something. They've gone in there, caught him red-handed stealing money or whatever, and taken him into custody. So at that point, once there's been a probable cause affidavit filed by a police department, I know clearly there's something up here. So we just go to an investigation at that point. But the reason I open an assessment first, we charge individuals that are stealing or engaged in malfeasance. We charge $968 a day to do our investigation. So I told you we get a lot of bad information, and sometimes we have to go down, and do an assessment, sit down with somebody. And, a couple months ago, there was an allegation against the chief of police. I sat down with him for about a half an hour. He had evidence, paperwork, everything to show me that the allegation was completely false. The only thing it cost him was about a half hour of his time. So I don't think he would have appreciated it, though, if I said, hey, yeah, this allegation came in against you. It's false, but here's a bill for $968. So we always do assessments first to make sure there's some meat on the bone.
There's some, like we've been to some in Northern Indiana, like we did the police chief. It's vindictive. We find out later that someone just got demoted and that there's all these allegations and very specific. And that was, it was about a 3.5 hour drive one way, waste of time. And then a lot of times, like Ed was saying, these allegations come in shortly after an election. So it seems like there's a windfall of just bogus allegations, but he's got to look at them, and he had several today come across.
And some are vindictive, and the people making them know they're false, but a lot of them, I'd say even probably the majority of them, these people believe what they're telling us because they get this game of telephone going in their town talking about local politics, and it's third-hand information and they believe it's true, but it's just nonsense. So, but then once we start our investigation, that's when we're on the clock, and I can give you an example. Oops, lost my PowerPoint.
Oh, technical support.
But I don't think I hit anything. I think the TV just went up. Okay, there we go. We did the Jamie Knoll investigation a little over a year ago. That was about $4.6 million fraud. He was the sheriff with all the classic cars and stuff like that. Very good friend of Scotty's.
We had a couple cigars together. Give me a break, Ed.
And, okay, so $4.6 million, that investigation we charged him over $300,000 in special investigation costs as well. So it does add up quickly. And then, of course, our reports, they go to the Attorney General's office and they're enforced civilly that way. Okay, possible outcomes when we open an investigation. It can be unfounded. No charge, no report. That's the end of it. A lot of them do turn out that way. Maybe we'll get an allegation. We go in there. The malfeasance isn't going on, but there may be a lack of internal controls or something like that that could potentially contribute to a problem down the road, or there's a compliance issue. So we'll do a compliance report. One other thing that's not listed up there that we do sometimes, we can also do a management letter, which is a private letter. It is not public record. It's from my office to the unit, just saying, please fix this. Our audit teams will see it. I call it advice, but it's very good advice because our audit teams are going to look at it before they go into the next audit. And if you haven't addressed what's in that management letter, they may, take exception to some things. And then, of course, we'll have charge reports and charge report with criminal prosecution. Like I said, about the only time a charge report won't have a criminal prosecution is a case of nonfeasance, where it's just incompetence, not doing your job. It's not stealing, but, that's it. So, okay, one of the most common allegations we get, I would say it's either first or second, is ghost employment. Conflict of interest. We have a lot of conflict of interest as well. Ghost employment, we've had the 3 years I've been here, we've had 2 successful cases with ghost employment. One of them I'm going to talk about in a minute, and the other was Jamie Knoll. His maintenance guy who was building his personal barn while on the clock for the county was savvy enough to keep really good records and even take pictures of the work he was doing, and then gave them to us after the fact. So we were able to charge Jamie with ghost employment because he was the sheriff having an employee build his barn where he kept all his classic cars at.
While he was on duty at the sheriff's office.
Yeah. While he was supposed to be doing, sheriff's department work. So, but ghost employment is difficult because of incomplete time records, remote work policies, unclear job descriptions. But the biggest one is quantifying a loss. If I had an allegation last week, this employee is always on the computer doing their eBay business while they're working. How am I supposed to quantify that? It's pretty much impossible. So you'll see in a minute, ideally for ghost employment, you want them working at 2 locations where the time records both say like 9 to 5, 9 to 5. They contradict. You can't be at 2 places at once. Then you got them. That's when you'll have a successful ghost employment. So, okay, and here it is. The town of Van Buren, the clerk treasurer hired her daughter as the deputy clerk. And here's where local politics gets nasty. Sounds like, well, I'll just say this. The town marshal was keeping tabs on when that deputy clerk was not in the office, which was most of the time. And the deputy clerk also had a job at a nearby school. And she kept time records for the hours she was at the school, and she kept exact time records for when she was being paid as a deputy clerk as well. And of course, they overlapped. That's a big problem because you can't be 2 places at once. And we knew the school job, she had to actually physically be there, or they, but the job where her mom's her boss, she was never there. That was that's where the stealing was going on. So we were able to prove that one. Yeah, she was paid for about $6,400 time that she wasn't in the office. And then we ended up charging both the clerk treasurer and the deputy clerk because the clerk treasurer allowed it to happen. She's the elected official. So, and here's where the loss was $63.98. Our special investigation costs were $63.05. So it was almost an equal number, that she had to pay both of those. And yeah, the clerk was criminally charged with fraud, counterfeiting, ghost employment, and official misconduct. And she received 2.5 years probation. I know when you hear that, that doesn't sound like, well, they didn't get any time, but keep in mind, these aren't thugs. These are people that don't, it was probably pretty traumatic for her to be arrested and be on probation and stuff like that. So, a lot of the people Scotty and I dealt with in our prior occupation would laugh at a probation sentence.
Yeah.
They'd laugh at 5 years, but someone like this who's never been in trouble, it's kind of a big deal. So try to keep that in perspective. Now, I don't know if I mentioned, townships are our biggest problem children within Indiana. We've got over 1,000 of them. They're only audited every 4 years. And depending on the board, there may not be any oversight going on there. The board can sometimes be asleep at the wheel or they're not catching things. So townships give us, I would say they make up 1/3 of our investigations within special SI. So we had Mariama Wilson, she was the trustee. And then we had William Payne, who was the Township Community Relations Director and Shelter Coordinator. And then their good buddy, Terrence Hardiman, opened an LLC, Hardiman Construction. And the three of them were in on this together. This was an FBI investigation. But one of the things that the trustee's office was over was this Dorothea McGregor family shelter. And they started paying this Hardiman LLC a lot of money to do work there. Well, what was really going on is he was barely doing anything, and he was giving money back to the trustee and to Payne. So it was a kickback scheme. Okay, so
Inflated payments for jobs.
Right.
You'll see.
Right. It's
Astronomical, stupid stuff.
And okay, what they did was we couldn't charge them for stuff that he actually did, even though it was ridiculous. And I'll give you an example. There was a deck on the back of this thing. You can't see it from the side, but on the opposite side, it was an old ratty deck. And it had a stairway going up at about 6 or 8 steps with no railing. Okay. Well, Hardiman Construction put a railing on it. And I think they took some old wood, because it was, I could tell. We went down there and looked at it. And some screws, I mean, a couple 2x4s, 10 minutes of work, put a railing on it. They charged $8,000 for that. So we didn't charge them for that though, because they did do the work. They built the, even though it's ridiculous, that's just bad governance. And but some of the stuff they did do was, well, let me backtrack a little bit. They paid Hardiman Construction $215,000. And we did find that they received, the township trustee got a quote from another company, Arrival, for this, actually, not only the same work, but some other stuff as well. And their quote was $65,000 to do all this work. Hardiman's quote was $111,000, and they went with Hardiman. So, but what they did was some of the work that they billed for, it wasn't even done. So that's what we charged them with, was that work. Here's an example. This floor, you can tell that's an old floor. it was supposed to be ripped up, new subfloor put down, and new laminate flooring put down over that. All they did was, sanded that floor and charged, I can't remember what it was. It was a lot of money. Okay. They were supposed to replace those 4 stairs. Anyone want to guess what they were going to charge, what they did charge for those 4 stairs? I'm thinking 15 minutes of work here, but
$8,000.
it was $2,700. So, yeah, $2,700 for those 4 stairs, and they didn't do it. So we charged them with that. So they were supposed to, okay, this is the garage. They were supposed to put drywall up all in the garage, which clearly they didn't do. They were supposed to run all new electric, which they did do, but they charged twice for it. So, we added that on our charge. And then they were supposed to hang a suspended ceiling. They didn't hang the suspended ceiling, so we charged them with that. Once that one was totally done, let's see. Yeah, work not completed. It was about $30,000 of work that they put on there that was not done. But I mean, I mentioned this, the railing and stuff. They put paneling up, nasty 70s paneling up inside, and just charged them astronomical amounts of money. But again, they did do work. It was around 30,000 in work just not even done. And then the overpayment, they charged twice for the electric. So that was added. And then they just had checks going to them with no justification at all. We charged them for all that. So total, it was around just under $56,000. And then about, 31,000 special investigative costs that the 3 of them had to be charged, have to pay back. But the big one was, all 3 were indicted on 5 counts, conspiracy to commit wire fraud and wire fraud. And then additionally to that, Hardiman was charged with money laundering. The trustee, Wilson, she had no criminal history. She ended up not getting any jail time. She just got probation. But then Hardiman and Payne, they had pretty significant criminal histories. So I don't remember, I think it was 6 months or a year they had to go inside. So they did get some time. But that was Pigeon Township. Moving on, any questions on that?
Did they have to divide everything?
I
between
believe
three
so, with the Attorney General's office. I think so. Now the trustee would be bonded, so they could probably recover. Maybe they hit her with all of it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, we kind of turn our report in, and that's
Right.
last. So, okay, Fairfield Township trustee, another one. Now this is a case where the township board was actually doing their job, because they started catching this stuff. And they were very conscientious people, and they were very upset by this. But basically, a lot of personal expenditures by the trustee, salary overpayment, and then selling personal property to the township without filling out a conflict of interest. Basically, what she did was she took all the junk in her garage,
Pushed it out there and sold
yeah,
it.
and she got to decide as trustee what they're going to pay for it. So I'd love to do that, but it's illegal.
You can do it once.
Yeah. So, but some of the things she did, okay, now, I wish this was a little bigger. This is a receipt for a tire. And you can see on the bottom there, that writing, it says Crown Vic. Okay, the township owned a Ford Crown Victoria. But where you can't really see, I'll just kind of point to it. Right up here, it says vehicle, make, model, all the stuff, color. And you see there's nothing there. But on the original, you can see there's a few dots, and you know what that is? Someone put a yellow sticky over it, photocopied it to cover it up. So you can't see what vehicle, but when we got the original receipt from the vendor, you probably can't see this either, it's her own 2002 Honda. She had her own car get a new tire on it. So that's, you know, that's just blatant fraud there. And, oh, this was a good one. Took her entire staff to a team building event, which was basically they went and got massages and spent all day at a spa. Team building.
Yeah, yeah, Stacy, it's not gonna happen.
I know, right?
No, Paul's not gonna sign off on that.
Yeah, we're gonna go have beers later and call it a debrief.
Yeah, our last day.
But, so, and then this was a good one. Wait, go back. Sorry. Can I go back? Shoot. Yep. I went to back arrow right there. Oh. Okay. $17,000 in Tony Robbins self-help material.
It is expensive.
Yeah,
But
well, not if you're not paying for it.
Yeah.
I know.
So,
Township director, she called me and asked for a job at the Board of Accounts.
what's that?
She asked for a job at the Board of.
Talitha Coles did?
Wow.
Recently?
It was like before that court date.
Really?
Huh. How's she doing in the application process?
I showed her our website.
Very, very nice. That was professional. Good for you.
So total loss was 53,000. She actually, okay, she got sentenced to 4 years, but it was all suspended. But she did have to spend 6 months inside Tippecanoe County Jail, which
Always not pleasant.
again, yeah, it's, you know, she's not a career criminal, probably wasn't real enjoyable. So that was pretty good hit. So moving on from Pigeon Township. Any questions? Or no, this is Fairfield Township. I'm sorry, Fairfield Township. So, okay, this one was just finishing up about the time I came on with State Board of Accounts. But what we had was a lunch lady, basically, up at Anderson Schools. And one of her jobs was she would turn in vendor receipts for food and supplies coming to the school. The school would issue a check for the vendor to be paid, and she would make sure the vendor got paid. But what they were doing is they were sending it to her electronically, the check. And she had the ability to go into the check, change it to her name,
Oh,
and then after she cashed it, go in and change it back. So this went on for 5 years because she just started filling out fake vendor claims. The vendor's not out any money. They're not calling asking for their money. So she ended up spending she did this 312 times in 5 years. And yeah, $976,000. And she spent every penny on one thing. Guess what it was?
Drum roll. You can get this.
Gambling. It was gambling. So.
Price of food really went up.
So on this one, the Attorney General's office can seek triple the damages, and they are seeking $2,946,000 from her. So this was a federal wire fraud case, and I'm pretty sure she's out now. She did have to go inside for 28 months. That's a long time for a white collar criminal to be inside. So that was the Carla Burke story, though.
and why didn't like bank reconciliation catch it?
Well, because there's a funding source for the food. You've got a funding source to purchase, and then she's creating false
Okay,
receipts, so no one would ever be the
They went
wiser.
through a couple audits too.
okay.
It wasn't until one of our auditors pulled the actual check
And checked it.
and looks at it and says, wait a minute, the records indicate it's going to ABC vendor. And this says Carla Burke, same check, same date, same check number. So then that's when they started pulling them, they found, and she had actually retired.
Oh.
Yeah. And, they called her and she immediately blamed her boss, said it was him that was doing it or something. And
I'm sorry. So
Yes.
the vendor didn't receive any cash in 5 years?
no, they did. But she would make up
Another one.
fraudulent vendor claims
So
that
it
the
was
vendor
vendor
didn't
twice.
make. So the school's like, yeah, here, we got to pay these guys. They gave us the food. Well, it wasn't a,
Say twice.
Yes.
One to her, one to the vendor, real
Right.
vendor.
yeah. Yeah, the vendors got all their money because that would have kicked up a big red flag had they not got their money. So she was also getting money though. So. But, these are just kind of reasons. Good person may resort to theft. I call them excuses, really. But we do see it. Loss of a job, debt, passed up for a truly deserved or truly perceived raise. A lot of times we will see them steal, pay it back or pay partial back. And then it just kind of snowballs and
Number 6, Jamie paid for his daughter's medical
Yep,
college.
yep, as well, okay, yeah, Jamie Knoll paid for college expenses for his kids. Also, the Columbus Township trustee, he was paying a lot of money for his kids' tuition. So. And of course, drugs, opiates, they pretty much rewire someone's brain. They'll, someone who would never steal. Gambling, of course, like Carla Burke, blackmail, irrational desire to provide everything possible for grandchildren or family. Number one reason people steal, anybody?
Because they can.
Yeah, you read the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I did your PowerPoint.
Back it up
Let's see here.
to that one where they, leave it there.
There, okay.
Now,
Now Scotty's gonna,
yeah, I just wanted to touch base real quick on some of the things that I've seen and Ed has seen when I was with state police, like Ed said. We have probably 90% of our cases investigated in concert with the state police, but some of the cases I worked were with private CPA firms and institutions. And as managers, and like when I was the sheriff, I trusted my people, but I tried to get someone in place that was cross-trained so that if this wasn't one person with a set of keys to the safe and that someone could take over if they, got sick or left suddenly. But it's always good to have someone else in place to replace them and have access to passwords, keys, et cetera, et cetera. But some of the things that I've seen when I was with running the white collar crime squad with the state police is I saw patterns of people, they get comfortable in the position and they're like, okay, you got it. You got the books, you know how to do this. You're going to the bank, you're getting all the mail. Good. Well, that sounds good, but you want to rotate people in there because I'll just tell you a couple cases, these are being adjudicated. So if you Google them and find out, like the ones Ed talked about, they've been adjudicated. So it's public record. So there was a young lady in Cloverdale, Indiana, that was the treasurer for a church. And she started off, and I think she was there maybe 3 or 4 days and she started stealing. They hired her, they put her in charge of paying the bills, gave her a credit card, ran the office, and she would have the bills, of course, sent to the PO box and she had the only key to get to it. Well, there's always a mistake that happens. Either the person is gone for the day, a computer is left on, it's booted up, someone sees payments made to, they're not, there's always a mistake and then the house of cards falls. Case in point, new male person. It says, I think it was the Methodist Church, PO box, whatever. So they're walking by the church and they just drop it off. They go, hey, here's your credit card bill. And they're like, oh, okay, you know, Susie usually gets that, but she's not here for the day. And so they open it up and you would expect, what kind of things would you expect expenses from a church? An example, what do you think? Church, at a church, what kind of
Office
expenses?
supplies.
What is it?
Office supplies.
Office supplies,
Coffee.
coffee, candles,
Yeah.
you know, Jack Daniels.
No.
No, clothes,
No.
gas station. Okay. Well, they opened it up and they were surprised because a lot of that stuff was on there, liquor store purchases, and I mean, pretty large. So, you know, ultimately, you know, they had an audit done by a private firm and she was arrested. Come to find out, when I ran a record after I interviewed her, of course, she was remorseful. And then I find out she had been the treasurer for the Boy Scouts of America before she took this job. And guess what she was doing there? Anybody? Stealing. And sometimes you will see, and you might have heard, entities they would rather just dismiss the person. Rachel's nodding her head. So obviously you've had to fire someone for stealing, Rachel. But sometimes entities they would rather dismiss the person and let it, you know, they'll take the financial hit and let them go versus calling the state police, state board of accounts, getting them involved. It's in the newspaper. Fox 59's putting a microphone in your face because you're the manager. So they would rather just take the hit. And that happens more than you think. Other cases, a doctor's office on the west side of the state, and these are all very similar patterns. I mean, you notice a pattern. It's different entities, like Ed was talking about the cases that his unit has worked, but they're all very, very similar. They're all very similar in nature. There was an office manager for a doctor's office on the west side of the state of Indiana, and she was the best employee. She was the office manager. Some of the office manager's jobs would be what? What would an office manager job be during the day? End of the day. Deposit, exactly. So everybody thought the best of her. You know, it's raining outside. Don't worry, I've got the deposit. I'll take it in. So what she would do, and it always starts small. If any of you have ever had an internal theft or you've seen these reports that we do, it always starts out small. They always start small and they only quit when they get caught. So this office manager would go to the bank and she started siphoning off cash because she'd have cash and checks. So she would leave the deposit slip at the office, go throw that one away, write a new one. No one's the wiser because she's got access, and it's the doctor's office. There's a lot of cash. So she would start siphoning that off. Well, she would leave the deposit at the office, the real one, and she was depositing the bank records. And about the last 5 minutes of her 5-year tenure, she stopped stealing so that the records would balance. So she trained a new girl, and the new girl was motivated, unfortunately for the suspect. And she's like, oh, I remember how she told me to do this, but I'm going to keep digging back and look, and I'm going to go back beyond to where I was trained. So she's taking the bank deposit, and then she's looking at the one that she filed and is like, these things they're not the same. And so she goes to the doctor, and the doctor's like, I had no idea, just call for an audit. Well, do you know how much an audit costs from a private entity? This was crazy. It's like $22,000. And it was $103,000 loss. But it's very expensive. I can't remember what the firm is, but I interviewed them over here. They gave me a great report, made a great case. But she was stealing. And again, what do you think she was doing with the money? Anybody? I wish I had some of those little candy bars to pass out. Anybody? Guess what she was doing with the money? Come on, it's so easy. Wrong.
Gambling.
Yes, good recovery, Stacy. She was gambling, And then sometimes, you may be aware, I know Ed and I are, it's such a shock. And it's like Ed was saying earlier about these sentences. To you and I and everyone in this room, if we would get charged with a crime and we're looking at probation or a sentence to go to county jail or federal, federal pen's more comfortable than the state, but it's a shock. I mean, it's, you got to go home and tell your parents, most everybody's in here got a bachelor's degree, they're in positions of authority and blah, 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 and you're well thought of in the community. It's such a shock sometimes, and Ed knows this because we both had it happen. People hurt themselves. Case in point, the lady that after I had got her to confess, of course, I'm concerned for their safety, and she said, I'm fine, I'm good. I checked, thought she was okay. I get a phone call from her and she says, hey, is anybody else responsible? I was like, no, just, you did this on your own. She goes, okay, well, I'm never going to see the inside of a courtroom. I'm going to take care of this myself, and hung up. So fast forward a couple of days, she took off. We ended up kicking in a hotel room, still west side of the state. And she tried to kill herself with pills and alcohol. But it all worked out. They paid the money back and moving forward. But it happens. It's such a shock. But Ed and I, we met people, informants and stuff. They'd laugh at a 6-month sentence. It means nothing to them. So I'm just trying to think, what's my time here?
You're good. 2 minutes over.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to think some other cases. Cash cases I found are very, very difficult, but I'm not going to go in, that's too long. It happened in Northern Indiana. But I would just encourage you as managers, this might sound harsh, but only trust even if they're your good friend, this is business. This isn't personal, it's business. So only trust the person so far as you could throw them with their job duties.
I can't throw you very far.
See, that's why I don't even trust him. I'm getting ready to have my chair in my office, a swivel chair, because it's awful. He flicks paper clips at me, Band-Aids, and then he says it wasn't him. Hostile work environment. I'm gonna file something. But anyway, you guys really, like Debbie and Ed were saying, and I know you're not elected, but you're managers. You've got a duty to do your job and to ensure that the people who work for you and beneath you, you're responsible. At the end of the day, like when I was the sheriff, I might have had 45 employees, but if they did anything, guess what? FOSC 59's shoving a microphone in my face. They don't want to talk to them. How could you let this happen, Sheriff? I was out of state. It doesn't matter. And the same with you. You have a duty and should take steps like we've been talking about, and in the training that's available online that we provide, to be diligent in your duties. And it's good to trust a person. That's a good thing, but cross-train and, this person should be able to pass the books off to that person. She should pass it off to her. And by the time he gets back around, it should be okay. But what I have seen is patterns, and just like Ed in some of the cases the SBA works, they're very protected. They don't want anybody looking at their records. They lock them up. Even when they take them on vacation, they use the excuse, well, they don't understand how I do it. Oh, did mathematics change so much that, but you should look for those things. Not that there's anything wrong, but it's not a healthy system for management. And, the person that was always getting the mail and they've got the only key, because we've seen this, it's a pattern that you see over and over. And unfortunately, I think it's going to continue. So does anybody have any questions for me? No? Well, we appreciate your time and chance is up. So if you got any questions, you can reach Ed and I here at the State Board of Accounts or go through Debbie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed, Scotty. I always like listening to them.
they're kind of an interesting bunch. Now you listen to a boring accountant, but I'm going to talk today about fraud risk management, how to have like a fraud prevention program so you can work and build something so you don't have to meet those two nice gentlemen coming into your agency one day. They're nice, but you probably don't want to see them in the future. But when talking about fraud prevention, I guess the ultimate goal, if you're taking fraud seriously, is to create like a robust anti-fraud plan. Just a whole look at your agency, and there's multiple ways to do it, multiple steps that you should take and things to think about. But a lot of the stuff in my presentation here today comes from this anti-fraud playbook. And it's actually a guide, and it's made actually from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, or ACFE, and Grant Thornton partnered with them. And it's pretty much like a roadmap of where you should start and the steps you should go through to make like an anti-fraud program. There's this model that they have at the beginning, and I want to take each of them, I'm going to call them, I guess, components, where it's kind of 5 different steps broken down into smaller steps. First, you should, as an agency, when you're thinking about making a fraud risk management program, start with governance. So here they say really establish a fraud risk management policy as part of governance. Then once you have governance down, you can move on to risk assessment and then give you some ideas on how to effectively do a fraud risk assessment. Moving on from risk assessments, actually implementing the controls and things to prevent bad things from happening, undesirable things that you don't want to happen, fraud or not. But after that, moving on to once you have the controls in place and you find things that are happening or things are being prevented, how is that reported or how is that investigated? How do you follow up on those things? How do you analyze them, identify root causes, figure out like why it actually happened? And then it goes back to monitoring. So everything you built up and all those prior components, just kind of monitor that process, always improve it, just always a circle. So I'm going to kind of go through each of these points here, start with the first one, fraud risk governance. So in that guide, and I don't have a link to my presentation, so if you're interested after my presentation, I can send you that guide. But starting with fraud risk governance, they broke it down into 2 parts. The first one, they recommend that any organization should start asking themselves this question, like, where are you now and where do you want to be? And then part 2 of governance, just focus on creating that culture of anti-fraud at the agency. First part, just understanding where you are, where you want to be. Probably need to tailor it to the unique needs of your agency. Like at FSSA, it's definitely going to be different than at the Board of Accounts, like what controls and risk assessments, things that need to be done just from an agency perspective. And I'm sure many of you, just being government agency, being around long enough, you have some sort of maturity. You might have a robust anti-fraud program. I bet Department of Revenue has a lot of things in place, but maybe you just have, this thing came up one day, so we have this control, and you just do it on an ad hoc basis. So really just assessing what level that you're at and then where you want to be. But the guide also talks about if you have nothing in place, then just kind of asking some questions, doing some discovery, seeing, where do your fraud risks lie, what controls you do currently have, and then you can build off of that. But it's kind of like a roadmap. Once you figure out where you are, what your maturity level is, then you can figure out what you need to do. And it doesn't necessarily need to be like time consuming or rigorous. You can just figure out what you're doing, where you want to go, and then identify, okay, this is our highest area of impact for our limited amount of resources. So really looking at where you're at and what you can do with the limited resources you have is kind of the focus of this section in that guide. But they considered actually creating a roadmap. And if you haven't done a roadmap before, they recommended that you consider conducting like what they called a maturity assessment. And it's essentially a long list of questions. I have a lot of them in my slides. I know it's bad form to have a lot of words on your slide, so I apologize for that. But the reason I have all these things in here, I wanted to have it kind of be like a guide or a resource for everyone in the future. So I'll put this on our website along with this recorded video, but you can also ask for ACFE report too. But here's some of the questions that they recommend you ask yourself just to see how mature you are as an agency related to fraud risk assessment and anti-fraud controls. So is the agency aware of the need for fraud risk management? Do you have fraud risk management processes implemented, organized? Do you review those things, make sure they might need to be updated if processes have changed? Are you looking at not just what can happen externally to your agency, maybe a vendor, subrecipient, whoever, but within your agency, do you have controls for fraud? The things that you know about before that have happened that were fraudulent in nature, have you kind of aggregated those things, put them in a place where you can analyze them and decide based on that information what you need to do to the system that's currently in place? Is anti-fraud training provided to all employees? It sounds like it wouldn't really help that much if you have anti-fraud training. Yeah, everyone knows what fraud is. Fraud is bad. But if you just have that top-down approach and really make your employees understand that there are going to be consequences to fraud, they'll actually seek it out. Just having that system in place, some sort of way where they can go to report things that'll come to your attention that you probably wouldn't have known about. Having that zero tolerance policy, I think, is really important just to see how mature you are as an organization. And we at the Board of Accounts, as Ed and Scotty said, local units and state employees, like if fraud is found, you have to by statute report it to us. But there should probably be at each agency like a point person, and it's probably like the ethics individual. I forget the actual position of that person. But do employees at your agency, do they know to go to that person? Do they trust that the reports will be confidential? Maybe you should think, should there be another way, some kind of portal, not a black hole, but some kind of thing that'll be reviewed and actually encourage reporting. So they talked about those questions in the maturity assessment, and just to increase the perception of detection, doing different things to promote that culture. So like, are you seeking out fraud? Are surprise audits being done? You may not have an internal audit function, but there's probably some things that you could do to keep people on edge, make sure things aren't happening. Are you using data analytics? Are you just looking or reacting to things that are happening? Reviewing your controls. Like I said earlier, like tone at the top, does an employee really think that management is being honest and acting with integrity? If they don't, they probably won't be honest, have integrity either. But you can get that data by maybe surveying employees, kind of look at what they've been assigned. Are performance goals, like what you're asking them to do, is it realistic? Do you have policies looked at related to fraud? Have they been tested? Some of those things they had in the questionnaire. So these basic things that we've talked about in our prior presentations as well, do you have these things in place, like segregation of duties, use of authorizations, job rotations, like Scotty was mentioning, internal audit department, if you have one, do they have resources, and do they act without undue influence? Open door policy, more surveys about morale. So I think all these were really good things that you could just think about and just use to see where you are. So that's just part one of the guide. They talk about where you are and where you want to be, and they kind of lead into a culture. A lot of these steps kind of intermesh together. But when they talked about creating a culture, they talked about the fraud triangle, which I'm sure everyone's aware of. They have those three pillars of, one of these are probably present, like opportunity, motivation, rationalization, for someone to commit fraud. But they focused it from another perspective. It was interesting to me where they focused on the top down. So where like it's management's responsibility to have this, what they called integrity triangle, where you instill this in your employees, like 3 points here are responsibility, accountability, and authority, where if you put an employee in a position of responsibility where they need to be held accountable to themselves and they like have that authority to make change at the agency, they did some studies and they found that it just led to a more culture of less fraud, I guess. So that was an interesting read. It's kind of a different take on fraud. They talk more about how to create a culture,
how to promote fraud awareness. Kind of repeating myself a little bit, but fraud training, having a fraud policy may not sound like much, but statistics show that the organizations that do have anti-fraud policies and take it seriously have less fraud. And even communicating roles. So you might have people at your agency that are compliance related, or they are actively working to find fraud and prevent fraud. Do other employees at your agency know what they do? You might want to have like a employee spotlight, or some kind of message just saying, yeah, this is happening in our agency, because you may not know what's being done to combat fraud. And some other questions here. I'm not going to read all these. You may want to ask yourself on how to create like a good culture for anti-fraud governance. Like, do you have a policy in place, reporting mechanisms? Are people aware? And are you just assessing the effectiveness of your current plan? So that was that first box in that model, the kind of circular model at the beginning. 2 parts. And now we're moving on to the second part of the fraud risk assessment. So they broke this down also into 2 different areas or steps. To effectively perform a fraud risk assessment, they recommended first to think like a fraudster. And first, they said you could brainstorm possible schemes based on knowledge of your agency. Here's some of the things that they had in the guide. I add some things to it, but in this one situation, if I get my supervisor in on it, I could add overtime to my pay and then just split the pay with them. Could be one way. Someone could steal. Maybe someone notices that their computer's unlocked, another employee. They walk by and they're like, oh, I could download this account information and sell it on the dark web, or just change pay to my bank account. Could be someone that's upset. I'm underpaid. The state's been working me too hard. It won't hurt anybody if I just take this one check. But I'm sure you could come up with better scenarios than those generic ones. But just think like what could really happen at your agency based on what happens, how people work, and really focusing on just like what your agency is vulnerable to. Like, again, not just external, but internal too. I know the way the state works, PeopleSoft, some of that stuff is already in place, but maybe you could think of some non-financial fraud that could happen, like the theft of data, things like that. Again, going back to what was said before, start with known fraud events and existing risks if you've identified risk yet. And if you have not, or you may need something to help you identify potential scenarios, they recommended in the guide a fraud risk map. I added an example, may not be applicable to state employees because they do have PeopleSoft, but still it needs to be done properly. But you can change this, you can do different things if you use a fraud risk map, but this is just what they recommended. So I kind of filled it in here. For example, we could pick an area like payroll. You could say, what kind of fraud is it? It's internal. What's the category? Asset misappropriation. They're actually stealing cash, getting overpaid. What kind of scheme? They falsified their raise or their rate. So that'd be an overpayment. The actor, so it's that payroll employee. The entry point, I think that might be important for some brainstorming some sort of schemes, is the payroll records. If they didn't have access to change that, then that would not have happened. So the risk is that they do, and then no one reviews it. So the control to stop that would be more than one level of approval. But this is just sort of a map or a template you could use to help you brainstorm and do a risk assessment. Again, more questions. They probably had a lot more in the guide, but I've tried to pick some here to help with developing just specifically a fraud risk map. Like, just think about, if you are going to use one, how are you going to break it down? Are you going to go by department, division, employee? Maybe if you're a small agency. What do you want in your fraud risk map? Maybe things we haven't even thought of. How do you really translate that to effective a template so you can identify weaknesses in your controls? Just think of what your agency is vulnerable to. So that was part 3 under fraud risk assessment, think like a fraudster. In part 4, they recommended that you discover what you don't know. So having a lot of that in place, like a good culture, a good way for people to report, that just lends to itself of things coming your way that you don't know about. And doing that sort of thing just really increases the perception of detection, like having good governance. It just kind of all flows into each other. But in the session, they really focused on just being proactive and just making sure it really is visible at all levels of the agency. Recommended that you promote it, broadly communicate, and just my years being an auditor, I kind of agree. It kind of sounds cliche here, but they said risk assessments is more like an art, not a science. So you really should consider your agency, what your objective is for whatever unit you're looking at, and then what risks are specific to that objective being completed. Because I'm sure it's going to be different for every agency how they do it. But just that foundation that you built so far will allow you to find things that you don't know about that you can include in your risk assessment. They listed the steps of a risk assessment. So 1 through 9. To start, you can just establish your fraud risk assessment team and just figure out where you're going to start. Certain area, agency-wide, that's how big your team is. Then they'll start identifying those fraud schemes, doing the brainstorming, fraud risk map. And then they had some tools in there, but I broke it down. You should start by, once you have all that identified, just really estimate the likelihood and significance of each fraud scheme, just so you can use your resources and focus on the high impact areas. Then you can, at that point, identify, all right, what do we have in place? Are those effective, or do we need more in a certain area? And then kind of prioritize different schemes that way. And then the auditors, they probably would be very happy if you documented your risk assessment, because I know pretty much in every engagement we ask if management's considered fraud. I think we even send in most engagements like a certain fraud questionnaire. So if you go through this process and you have your risk assessment, if you document that, I guarantee that'll help you out in an audit. It'll just be good for you too, just going back, see what's been decided or what's present at that time, and then just reassess periodically, just like everything else. Here's some questions just on fraud risk assessment itself. Who's going to be on your team? Like I said, where do you want to start? How are you going to educate stakeholders that this is important? Really give you all the information you need to be able to perform a correct risk assessment. How are you going to prioritize? Things like that. So you probably see I got like 2 minutes left, and I've gone through 4 steps of 10, and there's a reason for that. Our bulletins online, we've been doing like an article every quarter, and we've hit one of these different steps. So we're 40% through, but I can give you the guide if you want to cheat and not wait for our bulletins to come out. But we only really covered 2 components of the model. We did governance and risk assessment, but there's 3 other components yet to come. So one of the components is fraud control activities. They talk about using data to uncover fraud, talking about how knowledge is power. Then they get into kind of what Ed and Scotty work with, doing that fraud investigation and how to go about corrective action. And then at the end, the monitoring part, the risk management activities, things that you could do, just monitoring your progress on the plan itself, how things are working, and how reporting to management or different stakeholders would work, or best practices to do so. So those are the 4 that have been released on our website already. But again, if you want to cheat and get that guide, feel free to send me a message and I can send it to you. You can find, if you don't know where our website is, you can go to in.gov/SBOA. And then entities we examine, you expand that. State agencies is there at the top. If you hit subscribe for email updates, you'll be on our listing for our bulletins. But at the very bottom of the screenshot, you can see bulletins. So you just open that up and you can find our prior bulletin articles. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, to end here, Adam Kolkowski is going to come up and talk about state advisory services for a little bit, and then we'll open up for general questions.
Thank you, Chase. So I'm Adam Kolkowski. I'm with the State Advisory Services, and I'm not going to talk about fraud today. And so I'm just going to give some updates on what we've been working on and what you can expect from us in the near future. So this slide here is more for newer internal control officers who may not know exactly who we are. To sum this all up in as short as possible, is we're here to help you. That's what we're here for. So we can work with you to give you audit positions, recommendations. We can help you resolve audit findings. We provide trainings like this one here. And like Chase just mentioned, we issued and published the quarterly state agency bulletin. And we also do perform special projects and compliance audits at the authority of the state examiner. This slide here kind of goes into, what we've been working on recently. So in the past, we've done the receipting project last year, where we helped agencies map out their receipting project and processes, and we gave recommendations based on that. If you are a newer internal control officer and that those results of that project were not passed on to you, just reach out to us and we can provide you those results. Or if you have questions on the recommendations we gave, again, just reach out to us and we can work with you on that. This past summer, we worked on the food and beverage tax review for the Indiana Legislative Council, where we reviewed all food and beverage taxes for all the local units that impose a food and beverage tax. And also throughout this past year, we've been working closely with the governor's residence inventory. We performed an inventory of their assets and we helped them improve their inventory processes. And the two main ongoing projects we have on now are the reconcilement project, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. And that was to gain insurance that all statewide financial activity is reported in PeopleSoft and that it's included in the state ACVR. We also expanded that project a little bit to include SDO accounts to ensure that those accounts are being reconciled and compliance requirements are being met. And I'll go into that here in a little bit. And then we also just recently started the contracting project, which I'll touch on briefly here in a second. So with the reconcilement project, we've been working on this for most of the year. We are wrapping it up. We're going to get our report together and we do plan on exiting with each agency. We're still working on how those exits are going to work and how we're going to do that. But I at least wanted to touch on some common issues we've been finding. I want to say this doesn't apply to every agency. These are more just common issues we've been finding, and just to get you all thinking of, does this apply to me and can I be proactive about addressing these issues? So the first main issue we see has to do with standard operating procedures or SOPs. So three things there is there either just was no SOP or anything over reconcilements, or maybe there was and it was just on a Word document stored on someone's computer and it wasn't on a formal SOP template. Or maybe the agency did have a nice, well thought out SOP, but maybe it was dated like 2012 or 2013 and it wasn't reviewed or updated annually. So in that case, we do like to see at least an annual review or update, even if there is no changes, just document that you reviewed it and that there's no changes and this SOP is current. The second issue has to do with actual documenting controls over reconcilement. So the main control we kind of look at for reconcilement perspective is there preparer and a reviewer, and is that control actually documented? So there's different ways of doing that. The main way we see that being documented is somewhere on the reconcilement, maybe if there's a cover page, there's a line for the preparer to date and sign and date to when they perform the reconcilement, and a line for the reviewer to sign and date when they reviewed the reconcilement. This last bulletin here has to do with agencies who might have a second system, a database or software in addition to PeopleSoft Financials. And for those agencies, we do like to see a reconcilement occur between the two systems. And that does include agencies who they will enter the financial transaction first into PeopleSoft, and then maybe it interfaces with another system to feed information to that other system. We still like to see a reconcilement occur between the two because in those cases, the agency is using that second system or database on a more day-to-day basis. So we just want to make sure the two agree. So the system they're using, the information in there is correct. And again, we will be exiting and talking with your agency about, specific agency-specific concerns or recommendations we have. That'll come at the beginning of the year, so just keep an eye on for that. So a recent project we just started has to do with contracts, and we divide this up into two phases. So with phase one, we contacted all executive branch agencies, and we just wanted to obtain their policies and procedures over contracts. The actual testing for this project, we try to focus on agencies who had contracts $5 million or more in fiscal year 25. And the main things we were testing was the contract approved by the appropriate party? and were the spending terms of the contract being met. Now, phase 2 is going to be continuation of phase 1 for those agencies who had contracts of $5 million or over, and we're going to focus on the bidding process. So at some point this week, you will receive an email from us asking you to complete a contracts risk questionnaire and to submit supporting documentation for the supplier selection process. And this is not going to be every agency. It's just going to be agencies that we saw had contracts $5 million or more. And before I wrap up here, I just want to remind you of some resources we have here. Chase just briefly talked about our website. One thing I want to highlight here, if you go to our website to the state agency's resource page, you'll see a section for the Uniform Compliance Guidelines or our manuals. If you click on that drop down, you'll find our Accounting and Finance Manual or Internal Control Manual. There's a lot of information in there for you. Most of the time when we're asked a question, that's one of the first resources we go to see what does the manual say. And even if you take that approach and you have a question, you do your own research, and you're still confused about something, just reach out to us and we can help you get an answer. We also do create short 10 to 15 minute training videos. We post them to the SBOA YouTube channel. So if you go to our YouTube channel, there's a playlist for state agency trainings. I believe Chase also mentions them in the bulletin, so that's where you'll kind of be notified of trainings that are available. There's a list of past trainings there if anything is of interest to you. And we're currently working on training for SDO accounts. So for any agencies that have SDO accounts, be on the lookout for that. And then the last resource is our Teams channel. So for internal controls officers, we do have a Teams channel where we post reminders of upcoming trainings. There are some other resources on there for you. And you can also ask us a question through that channel. So again, contact us anytime. We're here to help you. Any of these communication means will work. Probably the best way is probably just a Teams chat. That'll probably be the quickest way to reach us. But reach out to us if you have any questions. Does anyone have any questions over what I just talked about? No? Debbie? No?
I was just going to say, anybody who has not signed that's in person and wants to see CPE, please come on over and sign this so that we can get that sent to you. Again, I'd like to reiterate that we are here for you. We want to help you to be the best that you can be. We know that everybody has limited resources, so we weigh that when we offer our help. We're like, okay, we know you don't have 20 people to do one thing. And so we will consider those options that you might have. And we invite you to come to us at any time. Okay, so we appreciate your time today. Chase, do you have anything else?
Got anything in the chat, so.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time today. And again, contact us as you need to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, no.